Everyone, if we could come to order and open the meeting. Welcome. The first item on the agenda is election of chairperson for the coming year. Can I call for nominations, please? Councillor Bajent.
Lisa Machini.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Just to confirm, are there any further nominations? No. Can I just formally put that to the vote? All in favour, show. Thank you. And can I therefore declare Councillor Machini elected chair for the coming year?
Hello, thank you very much and welcome to this first meeting of the Executive Board of the Greater Cambridge Partnership of this electoral year. I am very glad to be back here with everyone. I would like to start by formally welcoming the new Executive Board member, Councillor Bridget Smith, who is unhelpfully not here, but she is now a member of our board for the coming year. She has been appointed to represent South Cambridgeshire District Council, and as she was unfortunately unable to join us today, we have Councillor Brian Mills here with us to substitute. Thank you so much, Brian, and welcome. We have currently got vacancies for the University and the Business Board representatives on the Executive Board. Andy Neely and Andy Williams are attending in their capacity as substitute representatives, and we're going to have the pleasure of having them with us for as long as those vacancies remain. So thank you very much for coming as well. Thank you so much, I should say this on a personal capacity, thank you so much to Neil Goff and Austin Adams, who used to be on the board until last year. They've been great support to me, and I will miss them. And we should thank them formally for all the work they've done for the board last year. I now have an empty seat next to me. We should appoint a vice chair for the coming year. And from the chair, I would like to nominate for that position Councillor Smith in her absence. Could somebody please second that for me? Thank you, Dave. And Brian, I will have you as co-seconders very happily. Is there anybody else who would like to make alternative proposals? And if not, can we vote on Bridget being the vice chair for the coming year? Everyone in favour? Thank you. I'll take you in favour, Dave, even if you're ignoring me. Are you happy? Thank you. Great. So thank you, Bridget. We look forward to seeing her next time. Now, we are on to item 3, which is apologies for absence. We kind of given a hint already, but are there any apologies for absence?
Just Councillor Smith.
So other than Councillor Smith, nobody. So here we go. Item 4, are there any declarations of interest from the Executive Board members on the items on the agenda today? Anybody? Yes, Dave?
Yeah, I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you. We will note that. Anybody else? Hello, Andy. We will note that. We will note that as well. Define near, I think we mostly all do. But if anything comes to mind at any point, everybody should just declare when it comes to mind. So thank you very much for that. Number 5, minutes. Can we confirm the accuracy of the minutes for the last meeting? Has everyone got any points, any questions about it? I see none. Are we happy to take the minutes as correct and approved? Everyone in favour? I'll take that as a yes. And I will sign the minutes as a correct record next time somebody reminds me to do so. Number 6, questions from members of the public. We have received questions from members of the public on items on today's agenda. On item 9, which is the Southeast Transport Scheme, there are 4 questions. On item 11, the Water Beach Railway Station relocation, there are 2 questions. We have published details of these questions on the website, and they've been circulated to the board as well. Every relevant item on the agenda, we will take those questions. Item number 7, we usually at this point get feedback from the Joint Assembly. We have Councillor Bick here with us in his capacity as the Chair of the Joint Assembly. Hello, Tim. You usually give us an overview after each agenda item. Would you like to do that this time as well?
Yes, Chair, that would make sense.
That's fantastic. We will do that at that point. Councillor Bick always gives us a written report as well, and that is available with the agenda pack. Item number 8. We are at the quarterly progress report. For anyone who's following on the agenda pack, we're on page 30. We will have a presentation on this item first, and Councillor Bick will tell us about the Joint Assembly debate, and after that we will have the board debate this item. So, Niamh, I believe you are doing the honours for this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things on this to kind of take you through the report. So the first and kind of obvious one is around the recommendation. So this is to endorse a request to deliver cycling improvements at the Puddicombe Way on the Addenbrooke site as part of the CSETS 1 programme. There's more detail around this on 6.8. The second kind of thing to draw your attention to is that we're a year into the skills work that you approved just over 18 months ago, and you'll see from the kind of appendix 2, it's all kind of going relatively well, but we've taken the opportunity, given that we're a year in, to kind of have a fulsome review of how it's going, and we continue to talk to people in the future and the Regional College around how we might kind of refine or sort of bolster some of the activities that are ongoing. We're doing that through the summer, and we'll take you an update towards during your next meeting cycle to sort of share the outcome of that of those discussions. The third section of this report that I wanted to draw your attention to is just around the kind of context, the additional context section that you asked us to kind of take a look at last time. I think members were keen to draw out just a bit more around the context of the city deal, particularly given the kind of political cycle that we're kind of at. So there's a kind of new section 5 which just sets some of that out, and if I just try and summarise it, and then I'm happy to take questions, or you may wish to kind of debate and discuss it. I guess it's to remind us all, we've been through a range of economic shocks in the last in the last kind of 2-3 years: COVID, Brexit, kind of international conflict. We're seeing employment growth gaps between kind of knowledge intensive sectors and non-knowledge intensive sectors increasing, and some of the work the Centre for Business Research have done for us on that sets that out in a lot of detail. At the very top level, KI sectors have grown. Employment in KI sectors has grown over 6% in the last during the year 2021. So an astonishingly kind of strong performance, despite what we're kind of seeing locally and globally. And so this is all thanks to KI growth, and we talked about that a lot here before. And that pattern continues. But I guess for us that's important. Why is that important? Continuing to retain and attract both the businesses and the communities that we need to ensure that we can continue that growth in a sustained way becomes ever increasingly important, I think. And continuing to deliver key infrastructure within that context just feels kind of vital. And we saw the census figures that were released yesterday, and quite astonishing levels of population growth, both in this area and in different parts of the country. So that's kind of in the context of us facing our next gateway review and our next test from government in a couple of years' time, which gives you the opportunity to attract further funding for this work. So to set that out, Chair, and take any questions or be part of any discussion if that's in any way useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niamh, for that report. Thank you very much. Okay, so we had a debate, there was a debate on this item at the Joint Assembly. Councillor Bick, would that be a good time now to tell us what happened there?
Yes, thanks, Chair. There are a range of questions and issues raised. The ones that I wanted to highlight to you were, well, first of all, that the single decision that I think arises from this about the cycling improvements at the Addenbrooke site was endorsed by the Assembly. We got that. Secondly, a concern about the deliverability of exception sites in the housing section of the report, which officers did undertake to raise with colleagues at South Cambridgeshire, and I don't know where that's got to. And finally, that there were a series of concerns about the implications of the over-programming within the capital spending pipeline for the GCP, and as a result, officers did agree that an item would be brought forward during next year to enable us to scrutinise that and to satisfy ourselves that that was less concerning than it might seem to be today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bick, for that report. Are there any questions or comments for Niamh or in general from members of the board? Yes, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the skills work that Niamh was reporting on, we have a background of very low unemployment and high employment, and there are particular skills gaps that aren't necessarily in high-tech knowledge industry. Thinking particularly of HGV, we had a refuse collection meeting yesterday where we were re-examining the difficulty in hiring HGV drivers. So that's an obvious skills gap, and I wonder if that's anything that we can give some attention to, at least a consideration. And then we continually have that issue over lower skilled jobs, but which are key workers, and accommodation for them is an ongoing problem. Again, people are coming 50, 60 miles to come to work, and that increasingly is a very expensive part of their overheads, personal overheads. So I just mentioned those that we could give some consideration to. Thank you.
Yes, Niamh, please, do you
Sure,
have any comments?
yes. I would just to pick up the first point, that there's sort of broader work going on across the geography that sort of combined authority colleagues are picking up in specific sectors. So I'll pick that up specifically with them and understand a bit more about that. I guess on the point around travel and affordability, etc., I suppose I would say that that's what this whole programme's here to try and do something about. So all the schemes and all the various infrastructure that you're agreeing to fund over the period of the course of the next sort of 5 to 7 years should start to try and alleviate some of those constraints. Well, I don't think they're going anywhere quickly, but maybe takes us back to the context of where we are now around the importance of getting stuff done to try and address some of those points. Others may want to add to that. But.
Oh, absolutely. Is there any more points or questions on this from anybody else? I see nothing, but I think these are, we are more or less, I say this carefully, where we want to be, where we'd like to be. We just want to get stuff done. It is absolutely important. we are aware, of course, that it's been really interesting, actually. It's very timely, and I will make mention of that later. It is very timely that we should have this discussion this week when we've had the census report, and just how much the region is growing, the area is growing, more than the ONS thought, more than the government says that they thought. And these things have, you know, we've seen the results of this on the ground. We've seen this everywhere. The business community is crying out for accommodation for all those jobs that are coming. And, you know, we just have to do this properly, or it will be done to us and not properly. So key worker housing, all of these things, it comes into it very, very importantly. So thank you so much, Niamh, for the report. If there's no more comments, we have one recommendation that we should endorse. We should endorse the request to deliver cycling improvements on the Addenbrooke site at Car Park H6, as set out in section 6.8. Is everyone in favour of this recommendation? Please show. Keep forgetting who should raise their hand and who shouldn't, but I take it that's unanimous. Somebody will shout at me if it's not. Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions, and Niamh for the report. And we will go on to the next item, which is item number 9. We're on page 68 of your pack, the South East Transport Scheme. We have had a couple of public questions on this item, so we will take those first, after which we will have a response to those questions from one of our officers. I think this is Peter who's going to do this actually, and then he will introduce the report, and then we will go on to the joint assembly feedback and the debate as usual. So, public questions first. I do believe that we have Councillor Howard Kettle here with us. Would you like to come forward? You have, what is it, 2 minutes? I forget. Yes, Chair. Thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Howard Kettle, Parish Councillor from Stapleford. My question. Following a consultation on 2 on-road and 1 off-road route conducted in February to April 2018, a decision to go ahead with the off-road route was made at the GCP executive meeting of the 11th of October 2018, with the Transport Director highlighting that, quote, the proposals are closely aligned with the development of the CAM, which is item 7, also recorded in the minutes of that meeting. Indeed, the submitted paper at Appendix B, Business Case B39, does state the CAM proposals, which form part of Strategy 1, contribute towards delivering the extended network envisaged within the LTTS, and furthermore, at B109 it states the proposed mass transit route is currently envisaged to form part of a wide CAM network. However, the officer's report to today's meeting, agenda item 9, at his report 1.32, suggests that the CAM requirement was introduced after the Executive Board decision to adopt the off-road route, which appears to be inconsistent with the facts. Given that CSET has been designed to be CAM compliant, and given that CAM has now been dropped as a scheme, will the GCP review this scheme against an optimal scheme on the A1307 corridor?
Thank you very much, Councillor Cattell. We are taking all the questions, and then you're all going to have an answer at the end. I do believe that you are also here to ask a question on behalf of Dr. John Coppendale, is it?
That's right.
Sorry, one day I will learn to read my own notes. Would you like to do that now?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
John Coppendale asks, the officer's report to the GCP Executive Board meeting to be held on the 30th of June, agenda item 9, at 1.30 states, route options were consulted upon in 2017. The entirety of off-road option was the public's preferred solution. Noting that the vote for the alternative A1307 was split by offering two options, compared to only one off-road option, 1,700 people voted for the A1307 in total, as opposed to 1,064 for the off-road route. And during that survey, anyone could, in event, vote for all the options. And also the more recent Anthony Brown survey, with a considerably higher number of respondents, showed that 81% would definitely not, or probably not, support the GCP busway. In the light of this, will the GCP have regard to overwhelming public opinion and review the route?
Thank you very much, Councillor Cattell. Thank you for those two questions. We hope you can stay with us. After the next couple of questions, we will have answers for you, but it was lovely to see you. Thank you very much. I now have James Littlewood, I believe, is next. I hope that's correct. Would you like to come forward, James?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think I was due to go afterwards, but I don't think it matters. There have been some significant changes in relation to the CSET scheme. The first of which is the preferred options for the local plan, which propose extending the Cambridge Biomedical Campus next to the A1307. That won't be directly served by the CSET route, whereas it could be served by a route that was discounted in 2018. This will significantly increase the benefit cost ratio of that option compared with the longer route across open countryside. Secondly, a factor in the GCP's 2018 decision to discount a route on the A1307 corridor was that it could not form part of the Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro, as we've just heard from Howard. Now that a detailed route alignment is known, it will poorly serve the villages of Sawston, Stapleford and Shelford, and in some cases could undermine bus services that serve village centres. One of the arguments for building across the countryside was it would serve these villages. A planning inspector, as you know, has recently granted permission for a development including a new country park. The busway will run through or adjacent to this park and have a negative impact on the park. In other words, the negative impact of the busway has increased. And permission for Cambridge South Station will be granted ahead of the busway. The rail scheme will proceed first, and therefore the busway construction works will have to fit around or be delayed by Network Rail. This creates a risk of further delay compared to alternative options. An alternative busway within the A1307 corridor could deliver similar journey times and reliability at significantly less cost, more quickly and with less damage to the countryside. Due to the expansion plans of the campus, it would deliver better economic and transport benefits compared to the costs. Please will you review the decisions made in 2018 and 2021 against an optimal scheme in the A1307 corridor. And secondly, in relation to the proposal in front of you today and the alignments around the village, option 2 of these would leave an area of land between the busway and Haverhill Road, which was no longer viable for agriculture. The landowner has already indicated that they will not allow this land to be used for environmental mitigation because they would like to build on it. It's therefore almost certain that option 2 went ahead, there would be a planning application submitted for housing on that land. Whilst the outcome of such an application cannot be known, there's clearly a risk that development could be granted in future, especially as approval has been given for the retirement village across the road. Therefore, the officer's report is misleading to say that the impact on landscape, environment and greenbelt will be similar for both options. Option 2 carries a high risk of future harm, whereas option 1 does not. It's important that the consultation highlights the risk of future development associated with option 2, so that people are fully aware of the implications when they respond to the consultation. Please will you commit to providing information about this risk as part of the public consultation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. I believe it's now Jim Rickard. Do we have him in the room? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, and good afternoon. My name is Jim Rickard. I live in Great Shelford. Having just heard the previous question, I realise there's a small degree of overlap with the one I'm about to ask. I hope it's a case of great minds thinking alike. I've been trying to follow the costs and the benefits of the CSET project, And I've gone back through the WSP study from 2016 and your board papers from November 2017, October 2018, and June 2020. And obviously, the BCRs of the different options have evolved, and that's quite normal as a project itself evolves and gets refined. But I do note that in the cases where you've compared the different options or strategies, as you term them, the two strategies that followed the A1307 alignment have shown better BCRs than your preferred route. And it seems to me that some of the developments that have been alluded to there in terms of speed restrictions now, no doubt an additional pedestrian crossing for the retirement village, and the need to slew the route to avoid the retirement village, which you'll be discussing later today, that they would seem to penalise your preferred route still further. On the other hand, as James has said, the development of the biomedical campus at the southeastern corner would appear to help the business case for the two routes along the A1307, and in particular for your original strategy 2, which had the deviation off the A1307 around the southeastern and southern side of the campus. I don't actually know what the latest estimate of the BCR for the preferred route is. The last figure I'm aware of is 0.81, which was in your June 2020 board papers. So that's 2 years ago now, so I may be out of date. But are you, in the light of these developments, now reassessing the BCRs for all three strategies that you put in that consultation? And would you make public the outcome of such a reassessment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I do believe we should also have Councillor Peter Fain, who would like to talk to us on behalf of one of our partner councils. Thank you very much indeed.
Using your discretion to allow me to speak very briefly to the board. I am the local member of the District Council for Shelford Ward. My question relates to a planning issue, really. I'm aware that the board has before them two options for a slight diversion of the route to take account of the retirement village. One of those options would go through part of the retirement village. One would go between the retirement village and the country park. And I'm just wondering, bearing in mind that the inspector was very clear in his report when he granted this appeal, paragraph 6, that the two were to be considered as a single application, and without the country park, the associated country park as he called it, the retirement village would have been considered inappropriate development. What provision will be made, firstly, to enable people from the retirement village to cross and benefit from the country park, bearing in mind that some of them may be of limited mobility? What provision will be made for the people in the village, which was also one of the benefits the inspector outlined to do so? And to what extent would the board regard those two options, as opposed to going the other side of the country park, as being compatible with the inspector's decision? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fain, and thank you very much, everybody, for your questions. We will now have answers. Peter, would you like to answer some of those questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of Councillor Catel's question, Cambridge South East Transport Scheme has been planned and assessed as a standalone scheme, as we are required to do by the Department for Transport. It forms part of a wider integrated programme, but it's been assessed as an individual scheme, and all that information relevant is on the website. The off-road route provides a more convenient service to the villages and was the most supported in the previous consultation. As the paper outlines, the decision on the preferred route predates the requirements of the CAM, and so the paper is correct. In terms of the question from Dr. Coppendale, major transport scheme development follows a prescribed process. Members will be sick of me saying that, I say that every meeting. It follows a prescribed process. We have followed that prescribed process. The scheme has been subject to 4 public consultations, and such consultations have been carried out in accordance with the guidance of the Consultation Institute. Local residents, stakeholder group, public authorities and the local MP have had and will continue to have opportunity to contribute to the process. Turning to James Littlewood's question, so the city deal was signed to deliver the planned growth within the existing local plan and to address the previous infrastructure deficit in this area, felt acutely at locations such as the biomedical campus. The preferred option does that. The future local plan has not been agreed, and the question is therefore speculative. The comment regarding benefit cost ratio is factually inaccurate. The CSET scheme, as I've said previously, has been assessed as a standalone scheme, and the business case reflects that, published on the website. The scheme was originally envisaged to serve the business parks. Following consultation and feedback from the local liaison forum, it now serves, or is proposed to serve, the villages as well. Turning to the second part of the question, the GCP operates in a rich governance environment. Planning issues, including the theoretical question around possible future planning applications and their outcomes, are a matter for the planning authority, and we look forward to hearing from them through the consultation process. Turning to Jim Rickard's question, so the scheme has been developed in accordance with statutory requirements, will continue to be so. A full business case, including benefit cost ratio, will be brought back to the board for their consideration in due course, as we're required to by the Department for Transport. In terms of Councillor Fain's question, the planning inspector made provision for the retirement village, country park and the busway. The busway was included in his considerations. They accepted the need to cross the busway, and the CSET scheme will make provision for that in terms of its final detailed design. The project team have engaged extensively with the developer since the planning decision over the proposals, and that will continue throughout the consultation process and beyond. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, I think we turn to the substantive item on the agenda, which is you again. Would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. The report focuses on the revised planning context following the planning application granted on appeal in Stapleford. The report rehearses the history in terms of scheme development, decision-making and other options that were considered. The substantive matter is outlined in issues for discussion in section 4, which is the response to the planning application that was granted and outlines a consultation and 2 proposals to be put forward in the near future. The recommendations are as outlined, Chair. I would just draw attention to recommendation C, just in terms of the continued commitment to refine the scheme to minimise environmental impacts of the scheme. That's not implicit in terms of the wider paper, but I think it's important we recognise that and we continue to do that through the course of the scheme development process. Happy to try and take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that. Now, before we discuss this as the board, we do have some feedback, I do believe, from the Joint Assembly. Councillor Bick, would you like to tell us how it went?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the Assembly believe this was appropriately an item about a need to deviate from the original alignment around the Stapleford Retirement Village and not an item about reopening the wider question of the alignment, which the Assembly and I think the Board have debated and heard representations about at some length on previous occasions. So we considered it in that light and supported the two options that are outlined, going for a targeted reconsultation. Members did express some disappointment about the consequences of this in terms of delay to the scheme and the fact that that the GCP did not appear to have been cited sufficiently about this planning application. But I guess we are where we are now, and were concerned that to have assurances that there could not be further such planning applications sort of lurking out there, which could cause a similar issue before we had got to the point of confirming the alignment.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. We should now have a discussion about this item with the rest of the board, and Tim is absolutely right. I mean, this item is in front of us today because, given the outcome of that particular planning application, we have to rearrange the alignment slightly in that area. The rest of the route isn't the subject of today's discussion, although I dare say people will make their comments if they so desire. Would anybody like to make any comments on this item? Yes, Brian. Andy next.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of things that I'd want to add. I'm looking in the papers at the figure 2 on page 72, which is Babraham, and I know that's not why we're here what we're here to discuss in this item. But I do have a question, as this is on my patch from the parish council there, which was if there's such a minimum difference in the cost of the brown and the pink routes, would we not be wise to choose the least objectionable to Babraham Village and go for the one of the pink routes, which takes it further away from the village? The other thing that I would comment on as a member of the local liaison forum over the years is that there's been a slightly shifting sands over the way that the routes have been presented. I know the initial consultation or the initial local liaison forum meeting really was unhappy with the original proposals, and they were taken away and worked again. But there was a shifting sand moment in terms of the presentation of the off-road route. When I specifically asked the officer who was there, what about access to the village populations, because the route runs alongside all the villages. And his answer was that it's not there to serve the village populations. So I think when that was in the public domain, part of the concern that we see today still being maintained is that the proximity to the populations of the villages on the route is now a major point. So there was some shift there, which I'll leave you to deliberate. And I think that would do for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. Andy, then I'm sure we can get somebody to advise on the answer to that. But yes, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So I was on the Assembly back in 2017, before your time, Chair. And I remember the discussion well, because it was an interesting discussion, because it followed on to C2C discussions and all sorts of other discussions. And as I recall at the time, what swung it at the Assembly was because the LLF supported it. And actually, it wasn't the moving sand scheme. It had been taken away by the LLF and reworked and improved. And so when it came to the options, it wasn't a choice of one between three. It was what the LFF wanted. I think the second point was, certainly as an Assembly meeting at that time, we had no guidance on what CAM was going to look like. We had no sub-strategy. We were sort of guessing. So we went ahead with it because it appeared to be the route which was favoured mostly by the local communities. So that's a point. To get more specific then, 1.35, CSET and Cambridge South Station are complementary but not interdependent. I will argue, probably not with any legal basis, that if Cambridge South train station goes ahead, then the number of passengers crossing CSET will have a material impact on how CSET is designed. So I think although they may be separate schemes, there needs to be a very strong interaction between CSET and the station. And I think you've made that point in that paragraph, but I just wanted to reinforce that, because I think it is very important. I was there just today, and those concerns were again being raised, a very tight junction there with various schemes coming together. We mustn't lose sight of that if those two schemes do go ahead. And then I did see the reassurance in the papers that we have a year delay, which I think is very unfortunate. If it gives us an opportunity to refine the scheme further, and I was actually at Nine Wells Nature Reserve just a couple of weeks ago, learning about their very local details. Now, I can't go on the whole scheme, speaking to everybody along there, but if we could get some reassurance that this year's delay is taken as an opportunity to further refine the scheme, further minimise the environmental impact, then we should take advantage of that and see that as one positive from the delay that's coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Are there any more comments on this item? I don't see any. Do we have anything we need to respond to, Peter, or are you...
I mean, I would just, I suppose in terms of Andy's couple of points, entirely accept the point around the interaction with the station, and we're working very closely with the rail industry on that. And then, yes, just provide that reassurance around this refinement, and that process needs to continue actively throughout the course of the continued development of this scheme. It's not, we don't say we've got a route, that's all terribly nice. Actually, this refinement needs to continue going forward. And I think in terms of Nine Wells, we're meeting them in the relatively near future anyway.
Thank you very much. I see no more debate, which would lead us to the recommendations that are on the table. We are recommended to note what's happened with the Staple for Retirement Village and the planning application that was granted. We are asked to approve an additional targeted consultation for the impacted section of the route through Stapleford, and we are asked to note the commitment to continue to refine the scheme design to minimise environmental impacts of the scheme. So in the absence of any other comments, can I ask all those in favour of these recommendations, please? I will take that as unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and thank you everyone for your questions. And the consultation will go live in due course, and we look forward to everyone being involved with that. Which brings us to item 10, which is the parking strategy update and residence parking scheme delivery, which we are now on page 82 of your agenda, which on this we don't have, as far as I've been notified, any questions.
No.
So we will have the presentation, which
It's actually Isabel.
is Isabel and not Peter, but I am sure that we will be fine, followed by, as usual, Tim will give us his input from what happened on the assembly, and then we will have a debate amongst ourselves. So, Isabel, would you like to take us through this?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Chair. So the paper focuses on two areas. The first is the objectives and vision for an integrated parking strategy, and the second is the engagement on parking issues and delivery of further residence parking schemes in Cambridge City. So just to take the integrated parking strategy first. So this has been developed with the City and the County Council, and it considers how on and off street parking could be more effectively managed to reduce congestion, promote use of sustainable modes of transport, as well as cutting pollution and emissions. And it sits alongside the wider city access proposals, including the Making Connections consultation that took place last autumn, as well as the road hierarchy consultation that's currently underway. So the board is being asked to approve a vision and objectives for the strategy, and these focus on rebalancing parking provision to support walking, cycling and public transport use, to shift demand from the city centre to kind of travel hubs and focus the city centre on things like blue badge parking, and to create more pleasant spaces in the city that can be made better use of for things like cycle parking, car clubs, pocket parks, etc. So we have updated the vision following the joint assembly to reflect the ambition to improve access by all modes, and also to recognise the need to increase the supply of cycle parking as well as increasing the demand. So today it's about the vision and objectives, and we'll bring back some more detailed recommendations for you in September alongside the wider city access proposals. So that's kind of the first part of the paper. The second part then focuses on the GCP's work to reinitiate delivery of residence parking as requested by the County Council. So that commenced earlier this year with some engagement on parking issues, and the feedback from that has been used to inform an initial delivery plan for further parking controls alongside a technical assessment as well. So the delivery plan would see parking controls delivered across the whole city, but starting with an initial tranche of 6 schemes, and these are Romsey West, Romsey East, Elizabeth, Hurst Park, York and Wilberforce, and they're set out in your paper. So if agreed by the board, we would be moving forward immediately with these schemes, commencing with some scheme design and public consultation. The aim would be to deliver them within the next 1 to 2 years. In bringing them forward, obviously, we'll be keen to align with the objectives of the integrated parking strategy around things like balancing the needs of different users and making the most of the space. So in terms of this part of the paper, the board's being asked to agree those 6 priority schemes and also agree that we should aim to deliver controls across the whole city over time, with a second tranche of schemes brought to you next year for agreement. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Tim, what did the Assembly have to say about this?
Chair, there was quite a bit of discussion about this. Obviously, most members found their ward represented somewhere in the report, so there was a lot of interest in that respect. But first of all, on the proposed objectives and the vision for the integrated parking strategy, that was welcomed and supported. And we made a couple of suggestions to fine-tune that, I think to improve it, to include a reference to access not being worsened or being at least improved by the working of the strategy, and also the fact that the vision included not only increased demand for cycle parking, but also provision of cycle parking, which these now appear in what's in front of you, so I'm sure members of the Assembly appreciate that. Then there were a series of comments in relation to how parking problems are seen in the city at the moment. A lot of concerns about pavement parking. There was a belief that parking enforcement, in particular outside areas of residence parking schemes, was not clear or effective. And there was a concern about the impact of large events on parking in neighbourhoods where they were being hosted. And my understanding is that officers intended to raise all of those concerns with the County Council after they've been raised at the Assembly. Turning to the residence parking scheme programme, the Assembly welcomed that being reinitiated. There had been several years of people being very frustrated by that having come to a halt, so this is good news. The first 6 schemes that were listed in the report were supported as those going forward by priority, and there was interest in reviewing existing schemes, some of which are very old, and some of which are very close to the city centre, and there could be changes that are worth making in the interest of our strategy there too. I think that is pretty much the summary of our discussion.
Thank you very much, Tim. Very useful. We will now discuss this amongst the board. Are there any comments? Dave?
Thank you, Chair, and I watched with interest the debate on the Assembly, and I think that, as in so many things, it is a forerunner to what happens here. and of course that was its role. I think that the need for cycle parking has to seriously be addressed by officers when this is going through, as we move into consultation mode with local areas. I think the surveys done by WSP indicate that there's a great need for additional cycle parking. This needs to be handled sensitively, because we don't want to set up a battle between cyclists and car drivers. But I think that this is the way that we're heading, and this has got to be part of that vanguard movement to achieve that. The concerns about pavement parking come in two shapes, really. One is the random parking on roads by car drivers, where they go up on the pavement and pop in a shop or into a cafe and use the facilities and then leave. That sort of pavement parking, I think we ought to be really, really coming down on very hard. I think we need to build in some method of controlling that, to making it very clear to the people that just randomly pull up onto the pavement that A, it's antisocial, B, it's dangerous, C, it damages the pavements, and D, that we will no longer be accepting that it is something that happens. The pavement parking in areas like Romsey, we have to be sympathetic to this is the way that it is at the moment, and that as we gradually move on with our GCP plans, that has got to be looked at. It's got to be, it can't happen overnight. You can't suddenly displace 500 to 700 car parking places immediately, but we need to send out a message, and hopefully as we become more successful as the GCP in providing alternative methods of transport, people will gradually begin to get rid of their cars, and that we can look for a way forward on that. But it needs to be handled sensitively. The idea of providing larger areas rather than small areas, so maybe the whole of an area of the city could become a resident parking zones to allow a bit more flexibility, seems to be a really first-class idea. I think the small restricted areas were probably not the best way to go, but we learned that from experience. But overall, really welcome the fact that this is now back on track. Angered really that it was seen fit by the County Council to stop this process. One can only guess at the motives involved at that time. Right now, though, we are full steam ahead for reducing traffic in the city. This is one of the big measures that will actually do that, and it has our support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Anyone else would like to comment? Hello, Andy. Yes, of course.
Thank you. Just a brief comment. I'm also supportive of the direction of travel, but just on the issue of cycle parking, I absolutely agree about the provision of more cycle parking. Can we also think about how we make it secure cycle parking? Because it's not just leaving your bike, it's making sure it's there when you come back.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. Are there any more comments? Yes, Dave.
Chair, I did miss on the question of secure cycle parking. It is sensible, I think, to look at every lamppost where we have a resident parking scheme and think about not attaching the cycle parking to the lamppost, but having cycle parking in that vicinity so that it's well lit. And that is a greater security in itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I am only very slightly amused by the idea of a lamppost as a facility, but I suppose it's one way of looking at it. Very interesting. As people, if anybody wants to come in with other questions, absolutely carry on. I do think it's very, very important that we consider a lot of these things that are in this report, just how important they are for delivering our overall agenda. One of the objectives of the integrated parking strategy is sustainable, inclusive growth, which in many respects summarizes what we are doing as a body in so many different ways, and the effect it has on neighborhoods and the fact that they should be livable. just how important public amenities are and the opportunities that there are if you can repurpose land that is currently devoted to parking, just how much value that would have to a high quality public realm, and just how important access is to places of employment, how parking should serve that rather than hinder it, and how all this council land and facilities that we have, how important it is to use it to encourage sustainability. And there's a big section in the report about revenue, and the whole point of revenue is that we need to pay for the services that people need. We are here to support. The GCP itself doesn't do the service delivery that districts do, that the city does, that the county does, but we exist to support the local delivery of those services, and that's the light in which you should see revenue, and that's really very important. And I will come back to this item repeatedly because it's been such, you know, a good coincidence that the census data has landed this week. We have massive growth in the east of England, and there was specific mention of the growth in Cambridge City, which is substantial, and it's uniquely in the area and rarely in the country across all age groups. This census actually did highlight just how disproportionately the 65 pluses are growing compared to young people, but in the city, young people are growing substantially. And all of these needs need to be catered for, and you have to ensure that you control and that you manage the car trips into the city. Where are these people going? Why are they going there? And how do we provide those facilities that people need so that they'll make fewer and more efficient, shall we say, journeys. So all of that, it is very important. It's in the report. It's the essence of what we're doing, so I think it's very important that we note it. Having said that, are there any more questions about or comments about what's in the report? Because if not, the recommendations that we are asked to approve are as follows. We will agree the objectives and vision for the integrated parking strategy. We will note the feedback from the engagement that we've done. We will agree 6 initial priority residence parking schemes, and very much these are as a result of what Dave was mentioning earlier. There was an unwelcome pause in the progress of these a little while ago, so we are prioritizing these as a result of that, but that is only one part of a much larger strategy that we are doing. And we also agree that the GCP will aim to deliver parking controls across the whole city over time, with a further tranche of schemes coming for agreement next year. Can I please have everyone in favour? 1, 2, 3, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you for the debate. Which moves us on to item 11, the Water Beach Station relocation. We are now on page 222 of your agenda pack. We do have public questions on this item, which, as we have done previously, we will take first, to which we will then respond and then do an officer presentation of the item, and then debate it as a board. Now, this item does have a confidential appendix attached to it, which is the main reason we're taking this as our last sort of major item of business. The information that Appendix 1 contains is confidential and it's exempt from publication as it refers to information about the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. And if we want to discuss this in detail, we will have to exclude the press and public as per provided by the Local Government Act 1972. I will move to exclude the press and public should we decide to discuss details in that appendix. So not just now, but at any point, if people want to raise anything that is related to the contents of Appendix 1, can they please give me notice of that? While we are here, I should welcome, and I hope he's here because I have a terrible... Oh, there he is. Hi. Sorry. I should welcome Stephen Kelly, who's the Joint Director of Planning and Economic Development for Greater Cambridge Shared Planning. He is in attendance to help us discuss this item. Very welcome, Stephen. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing your answers. We do have Jane Williams with us, though, first. Would you like to come and address us whenever you're ready?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for allowing my questions here. Why were RLWE unable to secure a commercial funding arrangement? Does this indicate the risk terms are so difficult that no funder was prepared to commit? If so, why is the GCP prepared to do so, should you actually vote in favour? Payback based on station car park revenue is not the same as profit. Revenue is total income pre-deductions, which you are probably all aware of. If revenue is anticipated at only 200k per annum, not all of this is likely to be available to pay off the GCP loan. This gives a loan payback period of at least 100 years. Is this a wise investment use of City Deal? It is noted that this will only be a partial completion of the relocated station. What guarantees have been given that RLWE, GCP and DFT funding will be in place? Could the GCP confirm that the station car park will not be reduced in size to enable the developer to fund the station? This is key regarding anticipated revenue return from car parking fees and reducing traffic on the A10. What is Networks Rail's position regarding the station being delivered by 2025? What stage of negotiations are RLWE and Network Rail at? What is the cost of decommissioning the existing station and who will fund that? What business model, predicted numbers, are the GCP using for the Waterbeach Greenways, segregated busway, park and ride and the relocated station? Policy SS6, para 3.42 of the FCDC adopted local plan states the existing A10 is at capacity and road improvements will be required, including measures to address capacity at the Milton Junction with the A14. Developers of Waterbeach Newtown Urban and Civic and RLWE have substantially underfunded transport plans. And this was actually stated by an officer at the planning meeting held on the 29th of January 2021, which was to discuss the delivery of the 4,500 houses, to which this refers to this, which the station delivery relates. I conducted a quick straw poll to seek the views of community, and it was a very quick poll, and straight away 190 people responded. 94% voted against GCP funding the station. And the last question, what sort of public consultation will the GCP conduct regarding the station location? I circulated a couple of pieces of evidence that will justify what I've spoken on here, if you wanted to hear them, but I think Wilma very kindly circulated them to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Don't leave us yet, but yes, we did receive the items that you asked to circulate to the board, and thank you very much for those. And I've only received them today, but I will read them very carefully. But don't leave us yet, because I do believe you're asking a question as well on behalf of John Grant. Would you like to do that now?
Correct, yes, thank you. Has modelling of likely destinations for journeys by residents of the new town been done? And if so, what was the outcome? On the 2nd of January 2001, Waterbeach Parish Council passed a motion stating, inter alia, that placing such a settlement on the main railway line to London will encourage those who work in London to move to such a settlement, thus reducing its effectiveness as a solution to the Cambridge housing problem. What proportion of the 4,500 houses are likely to be occupied by people who work locally? And I think we could include affordability in that one. And what proportion of local journeys are likely to be able to be to destinations that are near a railway station? If railway will be an option for significant numbers of people, has there been any consideration of the detail of how the train service would be delivered? There is very little space capacity on the railway, and it is not clear where a local shuttle service would be able to terminate. For instance, there is not expected to be a platform space for trains to turn round at Cambridge South. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane, for joining us, and I do believe that's it in terms of questions, which means my notes here say Neve. Are you answering those questions? Thank you very much, Neve.
So I'm going to do a quick introduction to the report, but just ahead of that, Stephen and Peter just might want to pick up some of those questions, I think.
Of course, no problem. Peter, you are being very kindly dropped in it. Would you like to answer the questions?
Thank you, Chair. So the developer has been unable to agree a commercial arrangement, despite developing a business case for the scheme. Predominantly, this relates to the additional income relating to rail fares that a new scheme in the new town will generate, and the Exchequer being unable to delegate that to the local area. If agreed, the investment today would come from another part of government through the city deal, which, as I stated earlier on to a previous question, is designed to support delivery of the local plan and deal with the existing infrastructure deficit that we have in this area. The car parking revenue will not pay off the capital investment. The decision in front of the board today is a capital investment decision. The car parking revenue, which will be guaranteed for the public sector, will come back in to the public sector and will link to a number of other items, quite possibly the previous agenda item that the board have just considered. The station car park will be delivered as per the current planning application. It will not be reduced at the whim of the developer. Discussions with the rail industry, Network Rail, DFT and operators continue and have been ongoing for some period of time. The costs of closing the existing station are included in the existing budget. All of the details of the existing Waterbeach busway are available on the website. That scheme is currently at the strategic business case, and we expect over the next 6 to 9 months to move to the outline business case, at which point further details of patronage, projections and the like will be forthcoming. The current status of the proposed rail station is that it has planning permission. It's been through the planning process and has been consulted upon. So if this recommendation is taken forward, there won't be a consultation on the details of the rail station because it's already been agreed. However, it's important to recognise, and I think the paper tries to do that, that there is significant engagement going to be required with the local community if the GCP decides to onboard this work. The report commits to producing an engagement plan, which I would expect the board and the Assembly to hold me to in terms of doing that. Moving to the second question, which I think also links with some of the issues raised around the A10 and Milton Interchange. And unfortunately, I'm not able to give you a detailed answer because the assessment was undertaken by the relevant planning and consenting authorities, which is the Highways Authority of the County Council and the Local Planning Authority when determining the wider planning status of the site. We will pass that to the relevant authorities and we will get you a response to the question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have anything, would we like to have any comments at this point, Stephen, or would you like to wait until later? If you've heard anything you'd like to answer. Otherwise, don't worry, I will ask you questions later.
I think just to echo Peter's point, obviously the trip rate and the trip distributions associated with the modelling that was done as part of the planning application that led the county to conclude that their position as highway authority on it is something that we can provide later.
Thank you for that. Stephen, now, hang on. Brian, if you have a question now, we can, but we've got, before we open the debate, we've got a few more things we need to do.
Just a quick question. While the question is still here, do we have any data on what level of commuter traffic actually goes into London from, for example, Ely, or even further afield? Because that was one of the questioners' Questions?
Do we? Anyone?
The planning and consenting authorities, the county council and the local planning authority, when they consider this planning application, will have looked at the impact in distributional effects of traffic and transport in this area. So that information will be available, and I think I gave a commitment that we will chase that down and we'll provide that information.
Thank you very much. Which now means that Niamh, would you like to introduce the report for us now, please?
Thank you, Chair. If I just give some brief context, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from board members. So to kind of set this out and set out the proposed kind of involvement of GCP, to try and kind of support the discussion. So this is fundamentally about housing delivery. So, you know, directly unlocking 4,500 homes as the paper sets out. And actually, the deal was signed in order to kind of accelerate housing growth. In flicking through the deal document, in fact, it acknowledges the importance of delivering the new town at Waterbeach. It's specifically mentioned to meet the area's housing requirement. So yeah, within the deal, within the document that colleagues have signed and central government have signed, we say the city deal will enable further economic growth by enabling and connecting housing growth. So I think it's really a key thread to your discussion to understand that context. As the paper sets out, and as Peter has just set out, there is a requirement to relocate the station in order to unlock the homes. Those two things are intrinsically linked, and actually the proposal that's in front of you is a means to meeting that requirement and using the city deal as a mechanism to do so. So very quick context, Chair. I know you want to open the debate, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Niamh. Very, very useful indeed. Now, Niamh has introduced the report. Would we like to hear what discussion took place at the Assembly, Tim?
Chair, considerable discussion took place at the Assembly. We also had a number of public questions, which were all quite challenging. We had worked through some confusion to, I think, a level of clarity about what the Assembly understood and what it believed was the way forward. I think that we felt that it was not our place in the GCP to be second-guessing the planning approval for the new town at Waterbeach, delivering housing that we know we need for our local plan, and we didn't think it was our place to question the importance of relocating the station to enable that to happen with an appropriate emphasis on sustainable transport. So we did not want whatever happened from here to undermine those two things. So we were asked to, we were challenged to take a view on whether, in that context, whether the GCP should be funding this relocation. And I think that point required a few steps back to recall that the whole of the city deal had in fact been originally negotiated on the basis that the extent of future growth in the Greater Cambridge area required considerable infrastructure at a level which would not be funded exclusively from developer contributions. And so you could look at any one of our infrastructure projects, not focusing on this one for a moment, and say, well, actually, to some degree, in each case, they are facilitating and enabling a development project to deliver housing or jobs somewhere in the area. So what was strange about this situation? I think that is the sense in which it wasn't originally expected to be a call on the GCP to fund this relocation of the railway station. That, as has been said, it was something which originally we had been led to believe, the planning authority had been led to believe, was going to be funding sought by the developer from another source. And so what has happened here to create the sense of surprise and in some cases disappointment or shock that funding source didn't come to pass. And so the GCP is in existence to support the kind of infrastructure requirements that cannot be funded through developer contributions. And so we were as an organisation visited with this request, albeit it didn't happen in quite the way that one would have hoped, and albeit we don't want to see it become too easy for other pathways for funding to fall through, all to end up on our doorstep, because whereas it does appear that this could be funded by the GCP, clearly there is an awful lot of further development in the pipeline for which we're going to have to rely on developers funding as expected. So the bottom line, I think, from the discussion at the Assembly was that we feel that it's inevitable that the GCP does have to step in here as described, but that we would ask the board to be cautious in the way that it applies and implements that help, that it safeguards the rest of our programme the best it can do, and it also ensures that we are not visited by surprise requests like this again, and we do not make this too easy.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. Okay, so we open the item up for discussion from the board. Would anybody like to start? Dave, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Assembly for a splendid debate in which the questions were answered and considered, and you could see the wheels turning amongst councillors as we indeed, probably the same way, are considering, is this part of what we should be doing? Should we allow this to happen? Are we the bank of last resort almost in certain circumstances? And I think that keeping my focus not on the planning permission and things like that, which I'd like to interfere with, but not our remit, we're not only here to facilitate and fund roads, we're also here to facilitate the infrastructure of the area. We have a situation where 4,500 homes are in the balance, and were we not to come forward with support for the station, which was perhaps earlier agreed, and the £17 million that's needed to support this project, then they probably would not be built. And that would be a failure of what we're supposed to be doing. But I am, like the Assembly were, acutely aware this is not a circumstance that we want to be advertising as something that we're looking forward to doing. I think it's something that we regret having to do. And I don't really want to labour this anymore. It's great to see the car parking will go to the public sector, and I'm sure that the local citizens will benefit from that in the longer term, because that will be there ad infinitum. But I think I appreciate the debate that the Assembly had. I attended that debate, listened, and I think that we got the message, and it's what I anticipate that the other councillors here and the other representatives here will be supporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Any more comments? Yes, please, Brian.
Thank you. I'm now going to try and avoid the need to go into private session. So I'll read from, or make reference to my own notes here. The university deals in time periods of centuries, and I'd like us to make note of the fact that long leases aren't the same as outright land transfers. The other thing that is clearly a disappointment for us all, I think, in this process, and I declare an interest because I was on the original planning meeting in this room, that wanted to get the railway station established before the houses were built out so that the pattern of transport used the railway and not alternative forms of transport, particularly private vehicles. And it was a huge disappointment that RLW estates were unable to fulfil the commitment that they made to the planning committee on that occasion. The last thing I'd like to say is that in terms of that disappointment, is I was at a conference just a week or two ago that talks about land value capture. The last time I looked at the figures, there was a 250-fold difference in land value from that was classified for agriculture as that for residential. And I'm frustrated that that isn't being reflected in this proposal. But as Dave has eloquently said, I think we accept that it's a right and proper role of the GCP to fund such schemes in the absence of other funding options, and I'm therefore happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. If there are no more comments, I would like, first of all, I have 3 questions. As per my instinct, I think the first question is for Stephen, and the second and the third would be for something like Peter or Neve, but I won't be picky, whoever wants to answer. The first question is, the papers they hint at, after the affordability gap was approved at planning, 20% affordability gap for the developer, there is a hint that profits exceeding that will be reverted to the planning authority. Is that correct? Is my first question.
Yes, it is. The process is a bit more complex than that because it's not purely about development profit, it's about the financial appraisal of the whole scheme. Just to be clear, and it's not for me to contradict one of my own councillors, but the base land value that we assumed in this, in the financial appraisal that was done for us independently by Gerald Eve of RLW Estates, assumes a base land value of around £100,000 an acre. The 2.5 million that people oft quote is a figure for a clear site serviced and fully infrastructured up. These very large urban extensions, new settlements require millions and millions of pounds of new infrastructure to go into them, and that suppresses the base land value along with the 106 obligations and so on. And so for the purposes of this financial appraisal for RLW, the values in fact that we were assuming back to the landowner were substantially lower. What that means in terms of, and the appraisal takes account of things like build costs and the infrastructure inflation costs in terms of delivery, so that it's not solely around developer profit, but the process looks at all of those variables again and based upon the assumptions that are, some of which are fixed about base land value, then returns additional net profit back to the planning authority up to the level that's appropriate for this piece of infrastructure. After that point, any further uplift would go to affordable housing because the scheme is not compliant in terms of affordable housing. And so any additional income over the 20 million would be assigned to affordable housing. The urban and civic scheme has a straight enhancement to affordable housing, not infrastructure, but the RLW scheme is set out will do that. Does that clarified.
Yes, thank you, she said very tentatively. But no, thank you very much for the answer. I'm not promising I won't come back to it. But for the moment, thank you very much. Yes, please, Brian.
Can I just thank Mr. Kelly for reminding me of those base land values from that meeting.
Land value, isn't that something we forget every day? My second question, it's about, so the papers explain that the total cost of the relocation of the station is £37 million, 17 million of which the developer is supposed to pay. However, we're advancing that to be repaid to us in installments, and the details are all in the paper, etc. and so forth. There is, you know, to the obvious question that everybody asks, is this an interest-free loan, and does this take account of inflation, which is a question that has been asked quite a lot. There is indication that the repayments will be index-linked, and I was wondering if somebody could explain that concept to us today. Hello?
So we work with existing values, and then the Section 106 agreement applies indexation to those payments to reflect inflationary costs, and that is applied depending upon what they, I think it's BCI that they use, a national index, to increase the contribution proportionate to that. So clearly the longer the delay in them paying the contribution, the greater the increase arising from inflation and a greater the increase in the figure. And that's designed to deal with, obviously, the inflation in terms of the cost of delivery that takes place over that time.
Thank you, Stephen. And yes, my final question really, it's slightly more open, and it does relate to something that Peter has mentioned when he was answering questions. We are on the hook here for rather more consultations than will just pertain to the program that we're financing, because the whole thing is big. It's a big thing that is happening. And if we're going to put money into it, we will be on the hook for the whole thing. You know, despite the fact that obviously, you know, which actually, you know, it is incumbent upon us that we actually do a good job of consultation and engagement, because it is going to be absolutely needed. And I was wondering if we could, at this point, give some hints as to what kind of consultation we would like to do. And I would be grateful for strong words of commitment from us at this point, that we will look at the issue in its entirety, because if we try to avoid bits, we won't be allowed to.
So hitherto, this has been entirely outwith of the GCP's bailiwick. And as I've said before, and you will have heard me say, we operate in a rich governance environment, and we need to work together, not to duplicate and certainly not to stand on anybody's toes. There are statutory authorities, and they have their roles exist. The statutory authorities have taken this forward. The decision before you today will be, do you as a board wish then to assume responsibility for this scheme? In doing that, we will then make a series of commitments. One is we will then own the scheme, and we will seek to deliver it as we've delivered Histon Road and all the other schemes. But a key part of that will be an engagement plan and an engagement process. So we recognise there is history, and we've heard some of it in this conversation. There's a lot of history around the new town generally, around the rail station, around the developers, and we can't change or unpick that. What we will do, though, is we will take forward this scheme, and it does sit within a wider context, particularly the Assembly mentioned a number of times active travel routes and the walking and cycling arrangements that absolutely need to be embedded as part of this. How do we link the existing station site in active travel terms with the new site? So as part of taking forward this scheme, we will take on board and deliver the engagement necessary to do that with the local communities in the area. And so that, I think that is, I mean, hopefully that is clear in terms of the paper, and if it isn't, I'm absolutely giving you that commitment that would be part of the process. And for members that have been around a while, they know that, you know, there's a lot of engagement that goes on some of these bigger schemes. and we will carry that forward, albeit some of the key parameters are set, like the planning application has been granted. So we're not going to unpick that. The statutory authorities have taken that forward. We will be seeking to, in terms of delivering the scheme, how do we develop, work with, and ultimately, sit alongside the local communities to deliver the rail station project. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
That is helpful. Thank you very much, Peter. Yes, Andy.
So just on that point, do we have good data, when you say the local communities, I'm interested in whether we have good data on existing users or users of the existing railway site, because they won't all be based in Waterbeach. So how widespread do we think the consultation with the local communities is?
So I think in terms of delivering the project, it will be the local environs. I would entirely accept that there's quite a pull on that rail station, but I think the challenge around relocating it really relates to the local communities. It relates to the community that has a rail station currently, and it's going to be shifted down the road. It relates to how we are really hooking in with the local environment, the active travel routes on that side. We will clearly be working with Network Rail and the rail industry. They have season ticket information, so there are opportunities to get information out to a broader audience. But I think in terms of the concerns that have been raised hitherto, they're very much the local environs, and that would be the focus of our activity. That's not to say that, if someone approached us from the wider Ely area or wherever they came from, we would clearly be engaging. But I think in terms of delivering the project and the local environment, that focus would be on those local communities that are directly affected by it.
Thank you, Peter. Did you have any follow-up to that? And was there anything else? Yes, Brian.
I'm just thinking about that question. I mean, the size of Waterbeach near town, on both east and west sides, is going to be in the region of 11,000 new houses. So, compared with the existing villages of Horningsea, Waterbeach, and so on, this is going to be a large development.
Sorry, Chair, if I may. That's absolutely right. And the statutory agencies are dealing with the wider development. This becomes really important in terms of how we work together. I think the GC, you as a board are deciding we will deliver the station project. So we will absolutely need to focus our engagement with local communities. We need to be working with Stephen and his team and county colleagues on that wider plan, but it is for the other agencies to deliver the wider plan. We want to make sure it hooks in, it knits in effectively. We're linking with walking and cycling networks and the like. But our role, should you choose to accept it, is to deliver the rail station. The wider site is for others.
Thank you very much, Peter. Are there any more comments? I'll make some of my own, if you will allow me. When you come into politics, the first two concepts you learn about are rock and hard place, right? And I believe these are particularly relevant today. A lot of this has happened, not only prior to my time here, but in other environments, in other authorities other than this one. And, and then it lands in front of us and we wish, and I really do wish it was different. In Greater Cambridge, we do have a very clear policy requirement under the joint local plan that we must deliver housing growth. We must deliver it sustainably, lest it happens to us in a manner that we don't like. And infrastructure, which has been mentioned in the debate, is a very, very important part of that. I said I would return to this, and I am. It is very timely that this week we have learned from the data from the last census that population in Cambridgeshire over the last 10 years has grown 10% more than the East of England average, when the East of England already has grown faster than any other part of the UK. And if this isn't to happen to us, we have to take control of it. And the distress signals that we're receiving from the business community and the size of the housing needs register already point to the fact that we might already be too late. Yet, quite a lot of what we've got in front of us is actually deeply unsatisfactory for, again, reasons that are outside of our control. In no known universe should it be allowable under planning law that the taxpayer is called upon to subsidise the profits of a developer up to a margin of 20%. 20%, it's enormous. And in no known universe should it be allowable, again under planning law, that the developer can lay claim to a further 17 million of taxpayers' money when, you know, this is in effect a loan. And, you know, I could go on. It has been mentioned that the scheme is not affordable housing compliant and that provision is required in order to compensate for that. And the cash that we are, if we do indeed agree to this today, the cash that we're advancing will put us on the hook in terms of accountability for this. We are going to be the deliverer of the new rail station, and we will be on the hook for the project itself and for any failures up to now, and hopefully they won't continue after now, of engaging meaningfully with the community. So I am extremely well aware that in advancing this project today, we are taking that responsibility on behalf of the board. It weighs very heavily upon us, and we have to understand what we are about to do. And if there are no more comments, I would like to move on to the recommendations now. And before we do that, I would like to ask, if possible, when it says recommendation C, we have mentioned about plans to engage with the local community, and I have made very clear that I do think we have to take that commitment very seriously. And as a result of that, I would like to change recommendation C from comment on the plans to support the plans. Would that be okay with the board? And would somebody be prepared to second that for me? If no one does, then it won't happen. Yes.
Can I just ask for clarification? You're wanting to change 21C from comment on plans to engage with the local community to
support plans to engage with the local community.
Oh, okay.
Would that be fine? I have absolutely no idea now anymore.
Page 223.
So we are changing comment on to support. Do I take that, Brian, that you're happy to second that? Yes. Thank you. That is extremely nice of you. Very grateful. Is everyone in favour? Please? Thank you very much. So that's noted, is it, Wilma? Yes. Thank you very much indeed. And I will now read the recommendations again. We are approving the allocation of 20 million to fund the relocation of the station, which also includes, well, it doesn't include, but in addition to that, we are advancing 17 million for the developer, which will be repaid to the public sector in line with the S106 agreement. We are endorsing the GCP's role in ensuring the delivering of the station, confirming that it does fit with the GCP's integrated transport program. We are supporting the development of plans to engage with the local community, and we are commenting, and I believe, well, we could comment, we haven't quite, on the draft heads of terms as set out in the confidential appendix. Can I have everyone in favour, please? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed for the discussion today. That brings us, only 10 minutes behind schedule, to item 12, which is the date of future meetings. We've got two dates already agreed for this year on the 28th of September, which is a Wednesday, so I need to check that that was actually in my diary. Oh, bank holiday. Bank holiday. There's a bank holiday.
It's because of the bank holiday and other meeting commitments at partner authorities. We need to meet on the Wednesday.
I am sure that's fine. And then the next was it on Thursday, the 15th of December. Further on from that, there are more dates to be agreed. The 9th of March, the 29th of June, the 28th of September and the 14th of December 2023. I would assume that we're all happy with those. And if we're not, we can take comments. But we give advance notice of those. And on that note, thank you everybody for the debate today. I think it was very useful. Thank you for everyone who asked questions, gave reports, answered questions, and made comments, and we will see you at the next meeting. Thank you very much indeed.